Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Before I begin, let's do a quick shout out. Where are you joining us from? And let me know your connection to donation and transplantation in the comments. I am Bria Herring. I am a public affairs coordinator for Lifelink of Georgia. Lifelink of Florida. Switching roles. And we have with me as well Tiffany Moore. Tiffany is the public affairs coordinator for Lifelink of Georgia. So welcome everyone. So again, as I said, as you're joining us with us today, go ahead and let us know who you are, where you're joining us from, and let me know your connection to donation and transplantation in the comments below. So let's begin. During the month of November, LifeLink Foundation recognizes National Donor Sabbath, which is observed annually 2 weekends before Thanksgiving from Friday through Sunday. This 3-day observance seeks to include the days of worship for major religions practiced in the United States. During National Donor Sabbath, faith leaders from many religions, donor families, transplant recipients, and donation and transplantation professionals participate in services and programs to educate the public about the need for the life-saving and healing gifts passed to others through transplantation, while also encouraging people to register their decision to be organ, eye, and tissue donors. In an effort to educate the public about the need for life-saving and healing gifts, we want to have a conversation with faith leaders from their respective places to discuss the role a chaplain plays while during organ and tissue donation. And later on, we will hear perspectives from a donor mom and kidney recipient.
All right. Good morning, everyone. As Bria said, my name is Tiffany Moore. I am with Lifelink of Georgia, and I am here to introduce to you two of our wonderful panelists today. We're going to start off with Reverend Dr. Patricia E. Simonet Gary. Dr. Gary is a native of Nassau, Bahamas. She was ordained at Ebenezer Baptist Church in 1995 and is endorsed to pursue CPE and chaplaincy. Patricia has had tremendous academic successes. She recently completed the Doctor of Educational Ministry degree in May of 2020 at Columbia Theological Seminary in Decatur, Georgia. Patricia serves as Regional Director of Spiritual Health at Wellstar Health System and also serves as an ACPE certified educator. Patricia is married and co-pastors with her husband at Owl Rock UMC. Her hobbies include singing, cooking, traveling, meeting people from various cultures and backgrounds, and her newfound hobby is herping on the weekends with her husband, Bert. So welcome to the table, Dr. Simonet.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, for having me. It's so good to be here. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone.
Yeah, and just so you know, I had to Google what herping was. I had no idea. I was like, what is that? It's very fascinating. And next we have Dr. Deb. Dr. Deb has had a long history of academic service and support to those addressing grief, loss, and trauma. She is certified in the self-soul awareness work of the Enneagram psychosocial spiritual assessment, end-of-life issues, and renewal after trauma and loss. Today, she is the CEO of Dr. Deb Ministries and enjoying life in retirement with her husband. Right, Dr. Deb?
That's right. That's right. Semi-retired, right? Semi-retired.
Semi-retired.
Yeah.
And so again, thank you guys for participating today. And we're going to just start off with you, Dr. Simonet. Can you just tell us, what is a typical day like for you in the hospital as a chaplain?
So thank you, Tiffany, again. So I have several responsibilities. I serve as administrator, as you said, regional director for our system. So on any given day, I can be traveling to one of our facilities around Atlanta. And I also serve as the director for spiritual health on the day-to-day operations at Atlanta Medical Center, Wellstar Atlanta Medical Center, downtown and south campuses, and also being an educator. So there are several different paths to my responsibilities. However, on a day-to-day basis, our chaplains come into office, and first thing we do, we check for consults, we check the phones for any calls that may have come overnight. We do have students in-house who work, and we have our chaplains rotating from day to day as the duty chaplain. And so what that means is we get to respond to traumas, we respond to death, we respond to any life link patient, palliative care, end of life patients in the hospital. So in addition to providing support for our patients and our families, we also provide support for our team members. And so from time to time, we may have a death of a team member or a team member's loved one. And so what we do is we provide support. We have something that's called WellStar Cares, and we provide diffusing, debriefings for units in the hospital at a time. So those are just some of the basic things that we do. We check for consults when we come in the morning. We check the phones to see if any calls came in overnight, even though we have an overnight chaplain who's not at the hospital, but they would come in as needed for emergency purposes. If there's something that can't wait until the next morning. We also do withdrawal of cares for most of our ICU patients. We provide something called Power Pause for our team members once a week. That's a time where they get off the floor to just pause, to breathe, to meditate, to pray. And we provide that service once per week. We also provide spirituality group for behavioral health patients on both campuses. So there's a lot that I can go into, but for the sake of time, I'm going to stop there. But on a day-to-day basis, on any given day, I can be called to any one or number of those things throughout the day.
Thank you for giving that overview, because I think sometimes when people hear chaplains in the hospital, I know from working in the hospital, they think it's all bad news when the chaplain is coming, and that's not necessarily the case. And so we kind of want to go into more of, grief and loss and some of the things that, in organ and tissue donation we might be dealing with. And I wanted to turn it over to you, Dr. Deb. What is your biggest challenge as a chaplain when dealing with families who are grieving? I'm sure you've dealt with hundreds of families who are grieving, and families can go through different stages of anger, denial, all these different things. So for you, what has been the biggest challenge as a chaplain dealing with grieving families?
The biggest challenge has been helping them face the reality to plan for the inevitable. The goodbye can be very challenging if they're not ready for that goodbye. So how do you get them ready? At times, even a little swifter than their emotions and their heart and their mind can wrap their heads around. They're in such a numb and shocked place, and yet you have to be with them in that moment. So to answer that part of your question, the challenge is, how do we move them along and yet hold the space of where they actually still are and honor that, whatever the faith traditions are, whatever the circumstances of the story are. I always like to say we chaplains and grief counselors and folks who hold these kind of stories, that's really what we're doing. We're witnesses. We're witnesses to a person's life that's coming to an end. And we've got to figure out how to help them find dignity in honoring that life and witnessing it well, so that the families can let go better. And then after the fact, we continue to walk with them for a year and sometimes two. And one of the beauties of it is that in many of our hospices across the country, and I was in hospice for 15 years with end-of-life care, and I worked with, on the corporate level, I actually even educated our staff on end-of-life care for the social workers, the chaplains, and the grief counselors. So it was a lovely experience to not only hold what you do for the families, but I think many people, as Dr. Simonette was talking about, we have all these processes, there's everything put in place, there's all this expectation of what a chaplain's going to do. But some of the things we chaplains also do is we hold the staff that's also hurting, because they've held the story and it's been a difficult story. It's been a challenging story, and they too are affected by it. So one of the things that I find I end up having to do is balance the two, between the care of the staff who is giving the care and the care of the family who's actually the one doing the major goodbye. So it's quite a juxtaposition for a chaplain and a grief person to stand in. But the challenge for me with the to get succinct to your question, Tiffany, is giving them hope that we can do this for a year or two. We are usually given in our systems the ability to counsel and care for them for another year or two, and they get one-on-one support, and that one-on-one support gives them a lot of hope that they're not alone.
Thank you, Dr. Deb.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Deb. I want to ask a question to Dr. Simonet, if you don't mind. I know oftentimes as a public affairs coordinator, I educate different communities. And one of the questions that I do receive a lot is they're asking, does my religion support donation? And so oftentimes I have to answer that question. And I wanted to ask you, Dr. Simonet, how many times have you heard, is it against my religion to donate? And then also, how do you respond to that?
Thank you, Bria. So, to be honest with you, I've never gotten that response where someone says it's against my religion to donate. Not that it is not happening or persons do not say that, but in my research, and I found out that almost all major religions support organ donation, whether it's eye or tissue donation, and they see it as an act of compassion. They see it as a generosity, and regardless of their faith tradition, whether they're Islamic or whether they're Jewish or whether they are Protestant, Catholic, or whatever the denomination or faith tradition, or no faith at all. Because we do encounter persons of no faith, but we are an interfaith department at Wellstar, where we cater to the needs of all persons. We are very inclusive, even in our language, and where we meet people wherever they are, whether they're Buddhist or Sikh or Hindu or no faith, as I said. And so sometimes there are some misconceptions around Jehovah's Witnesses, who are often assumed to oppose donation because of their belief against blood transfusion. However, this merely means that all blood must be removed from organs and tissues before transplant, but it's not that they are against transplant or donation. Even with the Catholics, and the Vatican supports organ donation for all Catholics and considers it a selfless act of compassion. And so in my experience, I have not encountered anyone who just totally is against, or who says that a religion or faith tradition does not support organ donation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Simonet. And Dr. Walters, I want to toss it over to you if you've encountered that, or if you wanted to just chime in on what Dr. Simonet said.
No, I concur with her as well. And I think that at Gwinnett Medical, where I happen to serve in and worked closer with donation stories, basically they vetted that pretty clearly before we went in and had the deeper dive of a conversation. So if that ejection was going to come through, it would have come through in a part one part of the conversation, and then there would be no need to go to a part two. But I've also had to throw in an interesting thing. We've had a patient one time who was so full of drugs, and having been a meth addict, her father was the one who actually asked for us to come in with donation from LifeLink, and said, is there any part of her that can still live in somebody else? Is there anything good that we can get out of this story, that I have to let a 29-year-old girl leave, but can she live somewhere else in somebody else? So we did the assessment to see if her body had anything to donate in order for that dark, difficult story to be a light somewhere else for her father.
Wow, that's pretty touching. And he said, is there any part of her left that can live? I can't even imagine saying that, about my child. But just to kind of wrap up this part of our conversation, in talking about organ and tissue donation, obviously, in order for that to happen, a death has to happen. Someone has to pass away. And so how do chaplains, and I guess this could be for Dr. Simonet and Dr. Deb, how do you as chaplains help in that grieving process? And do you feel that there are instances where organ donation helps families, that are experiencing loss in their healing. Or I mean, have you seen that happen where you can almost see, just how that decision impacts their life in a positive way? I know we hear from donor families all the time in that retrospect, but from a chaplain's perspective, can you kind of give us some insight into that?
Sure. So, in our role as chaplains, we are spiritual care practitioners. And what we seek to do is to build that relationship first with families through compassionate care, through our presence, offering support, emotional and spiritual support to this wide range of persons. And so by the time their loved one is at end of life, most times we have built that rapport and that relationship with them. And I have seen some families struggle with that. Some families, I'm not sure I want to do that. This is my baby, or this is my son, my daughter, and I feel like I'll be doing them wrong. While others, with open arms, they say yes, if a person is not signed up already. And so walking with families through that time, as LifeLink, Wendy Palmer, is well known in our facility and offers great service and support to our families and to our team members. And so in coordination and collaboration with her, as she approaches, or one of the liaison members approaches family, we're there to support them. And then we have something that's called the Heartbeat Bear that helps them with, as you talk about, with the struggle that some families may be facing. So at WellStar, we've started something called the Heartbeat Bear, where we have before the patient passes away, the heart beat is recorded and placed in a bear, and it's given to a family with that, so they can have the beat of their loved one for the rest of their lives in this bear. And it started at AMC, but it's now moving throughout WellStar, through our system, throughout all of our facilities. And I must say that when Wendy has often provided didactics for our chaplain students and our interns, and one time she showed a clip where Chris Henry's story was highlighted. This was a football player who was killed instantly due to a motor vehicle crash incident. And his mom made the decision for him to be an organ donor, and was able to impact 4 families. And as I watched that, I became a donor, and I said, I want to be able to do that for somebody else. And I signed up to become a donor. And I see families' lives changed as a result of that. And it's a way for them to hold on for their loved ones, as you said earlier, for someone to live through that loved one with their heart, or with their liver, or with their tissue, or whatever, or the eye. And so the person gets to live on through that. And so I see a lot of healing happen through organ donation. And it's been so powerful to watch that happen just before my very eyes. It's an amazing gesture for someone to give their organs to another, and not knowing who will get them, because they already passed on and gone. So you don't know who will receive it. And I think that's the beauty in life, as we live as human beings, to love one another and to serve. And so I think that's the least that persons can do.
Dr. Deb, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, we had a story near and dear for our own personal family. My daughter-in-law's sister was 2 years old, and she was the youngest heart transplant recipient in the state of Georgia. PBS even did a documentary on her called Laura's Heart. And Laura received a 10-year-old little boy's heart after a car accident, and his family did the donation that allowed this little 2-year-old, who could not have an adult heart but could have a child's heart. And so with that, she lived to be 29, and Laura died on her 29th birthday. For that length of time, in holding that story and walking with my daughter-in-law through saying goodbye to her sister, she made a book. And what did Laura do with her life for those 27 years that she had that heart? And so she's got a book of the different people that she cared for in her preschool work, because she was a preschool teacher, and the things that she did at church. She did try to do low-level dance in order to have movement in her life, even though she couldn't do broad. So Jillian did a great job of putting this book of stories together. What did she do for 27 years with that heart? And this is how she lived. So there is a lot of healing. Dr. Simonette's correct. There's a lot of beautiful stories and a lot of healing and a lot of opportunity for people to impress others as they go along. And Laura did a great job with those kids in that preschool over all those years.
Well, thank you both. And Dr. Simonette, just so you know, we're going to hear more stories of people doing this heartbeat teddy bear. I promise you.
That's
but
great.
We'll make sure that AMC gets the credit for being the originator of the heartbeat. I'm not even sure what you really call it.
We call it the heartbeat bear. When it first started, it was named after one of our nurses, Chelsea Craver, who saw fit to start this heartbeat bear. And so it was named the Craver Bear for a long time. So I want to give Chelsea kudos. But as we're moving it throughout the system, we're just using heartbeat bear.
Okay. I think I met Chelsea actually when I came to visit you guys once.
Okay.
You happened to be there.
Great.
All right. So we've reached the halfway point in our conversation. And so we are hearing from you guys in the comment section. I saw a lot of things coming in, people kind of checking in, letting us know where they are. I saw old faithful volunteer, Frank. How you doing, Frank? So thank you guys for all being here. And so now we're going to move into having our next set of panelists come in. Okay. And so we're going to bring up first, I want to go ahead and introduce someone who is very special, very near and dear to me. And just out of formality, I'm going to read a little something about her so you guys can have a greater idea of who she is. Shawn Smith is a graduate of Oklahoma State University with a Bachelor of Science in Microbiology. After traveling for her Delta Zeta sorority at the national level, she moved to Atlanta to start her pharmaceutical career. Shawn serves her community through her church and their mental health ministry team. She is a VIP platelet donor with the American Red Cross, and over these past 3 years has become an advocate for mental health awareness, suicide prevention, and organ donation. Shawn serves on the board and volunteers for Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies Coalition of Georgia. She is also an active volunteer with Lifelink of Georgia and the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So welcome to the table, Shawn.
Wow, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
You didn't know I had that.
I forgot.
Yeah.
And also, I would like to introduce our next panelist, Audrey Bella Langston, the bold, the beautiful Audrey Bella Langston. Audrey is originally from Chicago, Illinois, where she served as a police officer for 21 years until she retired in 2014 and moved to Florida. Audrey is the mother of 2 adult children and a grandmother of 2 granddaughters. And on March 4th, 2005, Audrey received her life-saving gift from her godson, and Audrey has been celebrating as a kidney recipient for 16 and a half years and counting. So please help me welcome Audrey Bella Langston. Okay, so thank you both for joining us today. And I want to ask, my first question is going to go to you, Miss Bella. Bella, if you don't mind, could you please share your connection to donation? I know I gave a brief overview, but if you don't mind sharing who you are.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, guys, to be able to share this story. So as you said, I'm a retired Chicago police officer. I always like to bring that up because that really plays a big role in my journey with kidney disease, which began I was hired in 93, and I was literally coming off my probationary status in 1994 when I was in Wisconsin Dells for the weekends with friends celebrating my birthday, and I just suddenly became very, very ill. the interesting thing is that it was really weird because I was in the best shape of my life. And I think a lot of times we make the mistake of thinking because we're in great physical shape, that we're all good, and nothing's wrong with us. So I was having symptoms like extreme fatigue, more fatigued than I could ever recall myself being, no matter how many activities. I was very physically active and into athletics and things like that. But I was more fatigued than ever. I was experiencing nausea, severe headache. I was having an urge to urinate very consistently, however, but with little output, which was obviously scary to me as well. I'm like, okay, what's going on? And then when I would urinate, it would be what could be described as rather frothy or foamy. And so all of those are definitely signs, I came to realize later, that something is wrong. So I started out that first day of the trip trying to be social, but it was very difficult because I wasn't feeling well. My party was thinking, you're just tired. I was on midnights, which was awful. And that was something my body could never get used to. So by the next morning, again, I'm back in the bathroom. All of those symptoms have now worsened. The headache was totally excruciating. I remember vomiting at least one time. So I woke them up. I said, guys, listen, I'm really, really sick. I'm not feeling any better. I need you guys to take me back home. I'm so sorry. So they're like, yeah, fine, no problem. Let's go. I wanted to go to the hospital, actually, is what I said. So en route on this 3.5-hour journey back to Chicago, I didn't want to go anywhere local. I nodded off, went to sleep, and woke up about 30 minutes later, opened my eyes, and I was literally blind. I could not see. And at that point, it startled me so bad, it freaked them out. The person that's driving steps on the gas. And by the time we get to the hospital, they slapped a cuff on me. My blood pressure was like 200 over like 120. I was literally about to have a stroke. And so at that point, I was admitted. A biopsy was done the next day. And that's when I was told I have the kidney disease, which is called focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. And yes, that is long. And it took me a while to be able to properly say it, but it's short-termed FSGS. So that's when I was assigned to a nephrologist. He explained everything. It was very clear. And he said, eventually you are going to need a life-saving organ. You're going to need a transplant, that my kidneys would never get better.
Wow.
And if I can add too, I didn't want to take up much time, but it was about 12 years before mine got to an aggressive stage of needing dialysis. I was very blessed. I had 3 potential donors initially, but unfortunately they all fell through, and that's living donors. I was added to the list. The list in Illinois is extremely long. And they fell through. And that was when my godson, Roger Reynolds, stepped up and offered to give me a kidney. He was an excellent match, an old donor. We love old donors because they're universal. And when he gave me that life-saving organ, my life was just amazing after that. And we were literally in the hospital. I was in there 2 days. He went home the next day, and I went home the day after, which was my 43rd birthday at that time. So who would have thought I got sick on the weekend of my birthday, and I was healed by God with the gift of life on the weekend of my birthday.
Yes, and you're celebrating 16.5 years now.
Correct. Yes.
Well, thank you, Audrey. Sean, if you don't mind, could you share your connection to donation as well? I'm sorry, Sean, you were muted. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Better? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it was really knowing that I was an organ donor to begin with, driver's license and such. I will say that after moving to Atlanta, marrying my husband, the first connection to donation was with his cousin, who received a liver. So we saw what Bill went through, and what it meant for him to get that liver. The second connection was with one of our church friends who happened to live right across the street from where I moved my parents from Oklahoma to Winder, Georgia. And so I look at ways that that God has put people in my path. And I truly say that across the street neighbors with my parents, we saw that connection immediately. Visiting Katrine at Emory after her transplant, helping her celebrate her anniversaries of her liver transplant, which she so nicknamed Peaches, and her name is Katrine, so it was Peaches and Trine, and so we celebrated every anniversary while they lived across the street from my parents. With peach cobbler, peach ice cream, whatever it called for. So those connections were ones that were evident to me and my family, and in turn, my oldest son Candler saw really that value of what it meant to be giving the gift of life to someone. So that's our connection to organ donation.
Well, can you talk a little bit, Sean, because I know you mentioned Candler just a little bit, but you had to go through some things with Candler, to get to the decision for him to be a donor. So can you just talk a little bit about, losing your child, right? And even in the middle of losing him, how your faith played a role in you deciding for him to be an organ donor? Because I know you said he had already made that decision. He already was influenced. So how did your faith get you through the loss and to, making that decision for him to be a donor?
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say that, and as you can tell from my advocacy work now, I mean, Candler had struggled with anxiety and depression really his entire life. Was in fifth grade when he first said he didn't want to be around anymore, and fortunately had shared that with two of his friends. So they immediately went to the school counselor, and he was under the care of a psychiatrist, a psychologist, his pediatrician, a loving family and friends. But with him seeing really that role of what Bill and Katrine received, he too, when he got his driver's license, he said, "I'm going to put this on my driver's license." And it's another thing, as I say, about God being placed and putting people in your lives that both Dr. Deb and Dr. Simonette serve hospitals. One where Candler was born at Gwinnett Medical Center, and one where he passed away at Kennestone Wellstar Hospital. To know that the minute we discussed about organ donation and the fact of the injuries that he had, the first night of being in the ICU, we immediately said, well, what about organ donation? And so that was a Wednesday night, and by Thursday afternoon, we were in contact with LifeLink, and we sat down with them in the green tower of the ICU at Kennestone Wellstar with a very supportive LifeLink staff that basically told us, and Candler was 19. So even though we would have made that decision for him, he had already made that decision. And at that point in time of his donation in 2017, he made it and stated no limitations on that donation. So it wasn't just his organs, but his skin and his tissue and his eyes. And so that was really the, what I saw as a hope and healing was the fact of Candler making that decision on his own, and knowing that he is living on in others, 5 other people through his organ donation, and then a young girl who received his tissue to repair her ACL. You know, my faith was knowing that that really, I shared this from the chaplain at Eastside Medical Center, which was where I attended my very first flag raising for Donate Life Month in April. I mean, he put it so well that, you know, God is good, and God made us with interchangeable parts, and that we need to share those parts. And I truly say that with the fact of Candler struggling with mental health, choosing to take his own life, it's my faith that has carried me through the fact that I know he is in the arms of Jesus Christ, and is watching over me every second of every day, and that he is living on in other people. And just the letters I've received from 3 of his recipients have been incredible. And I've met the young girl that received his tissue. So that too is that hope and healing that that I take with me, and that I take and actively share Candler's story whenever I have that opportunity to share it, because I want to share the way he lived, not the way he died, but the way he lived, and that he was a caring and loving son. He has a little brother, Thomas, who's a senior at UGA now, and he definitely, and as he says, he was loved. He knew he was surrounded in loving arms, but that wasn't enough for him. And so know that he's living on in other people is how I'm upright, and receiving those prayers of friends and family that also keep me upright too.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing Candler with so many people, Sean, because I'm sure you're inspiring, not just from a stance of organ and tissue donation, but you take a hard stance on a lot of different things. And I know that it's inspiring other people, because it inspires me. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Tiffany.
And then Bella, we wanted to come back to you. And so, I mean, you weren't waiting that long, I suppose, for your life-saving transplant. Everything seemed to happen so fast for you. As you were waiting for your transplant, was there ever any doubt in your mind, questioning your faith, or did you get mad at God? You know, did you feel like, what is happening? This is not a part of the plan. This is not what I thought we were doing, God. What's happening here? Did you ever go through any of those emotions while waiting for your transplant?
Yeah. So Tiffany, let me correct just one thing. I did not receive my organ until almost 12 years later, but that was a good thing, because the illness was not being as aggressive as it could have been. So I made in speaking with my doctor and making some modifications in my diet and things like that, and certain medications, certain meds I refused to take because of their side effects. It did help slow the progression of it down, because again, there was a 12-year stretch there. Thank the Lord he was in that too. But to answer your question, yeah, I was devastated. I was on the fence a little bit. And so let me explain that. First of all, I was a new Chicago police officer, a single mom of 2 kids, one of which was only 6 months old, and my son was almost 14. So for me, that hit me like a ton of bricks, because anything, I think, for anyone that comes out of nowhere like that, and you're broadsided with a sickness, and that turns into you thinking maybe you've got like a really bad case of the flu or whatever, and here you are being told that you have a disease that's going to eventually take you out if you don't get the necessary organ to save your life, is a lot for someone to handle, especially it was for me. So I was thinking about, oh my God, my poor children, my career is gone that I worked very hard to get, and I had no idea what the future looked like. I could only get the, of course, textbook realization from the doctors, that they give. And so I would also like to state that at that time, I was not a Christian. I believed in God, but I wasn't living a godly life as far as that's congruent with the Bible. So that faith that's needed did not kick in right away. However, as a few years went by, and I started to get a little more into teachings, visiting more churches, and kind of getting more of the word, that peace and comfort came that only God can give us. It was like an inner voice saying, I know you're here in this place right now, but it's going to be okay. But in the meanwhile, what I chose to do was, and that I knew would be the best thing to me, was to educate myself on that illness. In fact, I'd like to add that it wasn't totally unfamiliar to me, kidney disease, because my grandmother was going through it, which is probably how I acquired it, through genetics. So I wasn't totally oblivious to it. However, I definitely didn't see myself coming down with that. And so I knew what was going to be best for me was to find out everything that I possibly could about that illness. How does this work? What are the things that I need to do to modify my diet? Physically, is this going to be a problem for my job? Well, it actually wasn't until years later. I still remained in aggressive patrol as an officer until years later, when my numbers started to go up higher. And so at that point, I had to be put in a more limited duty status. But once I became a Christian, my eyes were totally wide open, and everything just seemed to start falling into place as I got closer to my transplant, as my relationship got closer to God. Then that's when everything started to make sense, and I knew that, I would be okay. And I think that's, the key for us all. We have to really, really have that, that faith. We have to get that peace that from God, as he said, that surpasses all understanding. We have to educate ourselves on our illness, because that is the key to getting us through it. And because of everything I went through, the blessing was the culmination of me becoming a speaker for the National Kidney Foundation of Illinois, the Secretary of State Donate Life in Illinois. And then when I relocated here after retirement, right away I hit the ground running with becoming involved. I wanted to be a part of LifeLink. Of course, in Chicago, we called it Donate Life. With LifeLink, which I love doing what I do to enlighten people. I got involved with Tampa General Hospital and saw transplant patients on the 7th, 8th, and 9th floor, the transplant floors, just to encourage them and enlighten them on what they can expect of transplantation. And we need that coming from not only the doctor, but people appreciate those that have walked the walk and not just talk the talk, especially when you're going through the heart of that, because it hits you like a Mack truck. And so it's very scary. And so therefore, once I got involved in these things, and I do a podcast on Bella's Hope for Healing, to help people, just to do whatever I can to get the word out to people about this, be another resource for this. And so I know beyond a doubt that that was God's plan for my life. This is the big part of it right here, what I am doing to help others. And I guess he had to take me through it to get me to be great at it and to want to do that and be diligent with it. So now, yes, my faith is unshakable.
Unshakable faith.
My comment. All right, now that's the motto. Well, thank you so much, Bella, and thank you, Sean, for sharing your connection, just sharing your perspective. We appreciate you all for joining us today. So now at this time, I want to bring back Dr. Walters and Dr. Simonette. But as we bring them back, I do want to pose a question out to you all that are watching us and viewing us right now. Do you have any questions or do you have any comments as you've been watching us and joining us today? Let us know in the chat box. If you have any questions or comments to our doctors or to Sean or to Bella, let us know. So thank you, Dr. Walters and Dr. Simonette. Welcome back. Welcome back. So we have a few more questions before we end off our live. Our first question will be just for open. First, it being, how can faith leaders support organ donation through their organizations? If anyone you all want to go first, please feel free to chime in if you have a response to that question.
So I'll go first. I was listening intently when you backstage when Dr. Simonette was sharing and what Dr. Walter shared with regard to, just spiritual leaders and or more so, I should say, the possible religions that are against organ donation. And I couldn't agree more. I know I've researched those things myself many times, and I could not find one personally that actually was forbidding of organ donation or the receiving of an organ. And that is really important with people who are either in need of an organ or those who are looking to be donors. It's really important to me in the ministry. I feel like ministers have the biggest influence over their congregations. They are the leader of the flock, and we believe in them. We trust in them. We want their opinions and their spiritual expertise, of course, but we also go to them when we have life problems, when things like this, when a transplant is needed. I need this. What are your thoughts, Pastor, on this? What are your thoughts? I'm thinking about being a donor, but I'm a little afraid. I need you to guide me. I need you to pray with me, which is what we go to them for. And so they have so much influence. I know my pastors had great influence over me with the word. And I just think that the best thing that they can do is educate themselves on it as well. I'm not saying to the magnitude to many of us that are actual speakers on that issue. That takes a lot longer. They have their other ministries and missions to deal with. But to be able to minister to them, they have to know a little bit about it. Also, I think would really, really help, we have so many days during the year that we celebrate these things. We give honor to donations, such as National Donate Life Month, which is in April. World Organ Donation is in August. I believe it's on the 13th. And right now, what we're in, the National Donor Sabbath, of course, is this month. Now, these are segues, in my opinion, for especially in-church ministers to open that up as part of the ministry, open the door for that, and reach out to LifeLink, reach out to Donate Life, reach out to National Kidney Foundation, Heart, whatever it is. This is the doorway to that. This is what we do in these organizations. We love to go out. We're happy to come out to churches and share on the process to dispel those myths and misconceptions, to send a person that has walked the walk, that is a recipient, and send a donor family, such as our dear Sean here, because that's what people want to see. They want to see more than the medical factor in this. They need to see this in black and white, in real life, where they can ask questions. And in my opinion, I think that's an amazing way to open this up. That way our work in these organizations won't be quite as difficult.
Yeah. Amen. Everything she just said.
Yes. I mean, I totally agree, Bella. I think education is a big part of it. There are a lot of myths, as you said, and misconceptions out there. But the same way that we have health clinics at our churches and other institutions and organizations, I think having some sort of health clinic around organ donation can be very helpful. If pastors and clergy persons, rabbis, or whatever your faith tradition might be, I think that if they're educated, first of all, then it might be helpful to have a domino effect and trickle down in the congregation. But both of the leaders, if they're not as educated around how it works or what the myths are and dispel those myths, then we probably won't see much growth. But I think education is a huge piece. I mean, where I'm from in the Bahamas, we would not even have a conversation around organ donation. But being closer and hearing the conversation, being able to ask questions myself to someone who knows how it works. And Wendy was and I keep blowing her horn because she's been so helpful to me and to our department and to our hospital with organ donation. I've learned so much over the years that, have dispelled a lot of those myths. And here I am as their donor myself. Signed up. So I think education is a huge piece, and having those health clinics might be one way of doing that.
Yeah, and I agree with what Dr. Simonette and Bella have both just shared. One of the things I'm wanting Dr. Deb Ministries to do is actually feed into that very thing through the counseling understanding. I think that's where the education pieces can also come in, because those people are sitting in those different pews in different faith traditions and different religious organizations. And most churches, and I've been a part of church life for, decades now, 6 of them at this point. And there's a lot of territorialism in churches. And so I'm just putting the cards on the table face up. So part of what has to come down is asking churches to honestly, for a fact, get involved with already established community needs. They don't need to keep reinventing the wheel. They need to get involved with the wheels that are already here. So that aside, many folks are sitting there with griefs of all these things, not just the organ donation, but even the disposition of how it interacts. Sean was sharing with us about her son and her suicide. I have a suicide counselee right now that I'm working with who lost her son to a suicide. So you can see how it moves into different places. And she's needing to figure out how to get some counseling and care and grief over her son's brain disease, as she says. Loving home, good family, lots of great support, just had this thing in his chemistry of his brain that just didn't let him let go and have the normality he watched everyone else in his family have. So my heart goes out to Sean's story in that she lets us know her son lives well on with other people. But what about sitting in those church pews with those grief care needs? So to me, every church should have a grief system set in place for the vitality of all the angst and all the wanderings that go on with all the interconnectedness that this does, be it cancer, be it organ donation, be it suicide, be it divorce, whatever the grief is, it hurts your soul. And if it hurts your soul, it hurts the rest of your entire world. So churches really need to get serious about serious grief care. And that's my mantra for right now for Dr. Deb Ministries.
That's a good mantra. That's
Yeah.
a really good one.
And
You
they
hit,
don't take it.
you hit it on the head, Deb.
I'm just saying, I've been in this and been in saying this since 1979, and I've been pounding this pulpit since 1979, and it is a minuscule of nothingness in churches about honestly doing soul care level of care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
And I
that's
mean, I
why-
think some churches, some pastors do very well with providing support and care for their congregants,
Oh, of course.
while others, might have a whole ministry that's allocated to that to do all of the pastoral care that they do. But I hear you, Deb, even on a
But you
deeper
can hear my
level.
passion, right? You can hear my
Yes,
passion
yes,
about the fact, because I have watched
yes,
so many broken lives lose
yes.
the connection to something holy and bigger than them,
Mm-hmm,
and lose a connection to relationships with others here on earth.
mm-hmm,
And a lot of that is because of our image of God is very wonky. And then on the top of that, they feel no support. So
Yeah.
why sit in a pew of any faith tradition if you
Yeah.
don't feel like you're getting support?
yeah.
So therein lies one of the connected places of how do you get soul injury and moral injuries of renewal after a trauma, like you've lost someone and they've given their organs to somebody else to live on. Wonderful. But now what are they like 6 months? How did they deal with the first year of loss? What was it like at that Thanksgiving coming up right now? And there's nobody at the table. There's a lot of realness and rawness to this. And as we share these stories, there's just some real serious reality. And I think there needs to be more reality in how we handle it.
Yeah.
Bella, you had something.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to just piggyback just on one thing with that, and that is really so true. And again, it's the power that's in the church, and that could be so awesome even for prevention.
Yes.
Prevention of a lot of things, like just we don't have to get as intense as once you acquire kidney disease or heart disease or whatever, but just things like the colon. So many things, that simple things that we're not paying attention to in our bodies kind of spiral us into these issues. And if that ministry, a health and wellness ministry, is in place, that is their focus. Health and wellness for the church, and encouraging that, and getting, like they would be the ones announcing these things that come up every year regarding these things, and having some speakers, doctors, or whoever come in and speak about that. And especially, like you said, Doc, the mental wellness issue is a very big issue too. Very big issue. And most people that are in that position, they suffer with it silently, to almost the pretty much, sadly, the brink of suicide. And it's because it's not being addressed. I really believe that it's not being addressed enough. Nobody wants to talk about those things, and this is really what we need. And we know the church is just a hospital anyway for broken
That's exactly
people.
right.
So that's the place to start it. That's a great place to start it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'll say just real quickly, because I know time is limited, but that's exactly what my church, First Christian Church, Disciples of Christ in Winder, Georgia, has done. We established a mental health ministry team made up of 2 retired nurses and me and our pastor. My pastor was with me throughout everything at the ICU, and she's now serves on the board for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. We've sponsored the Bexar County Out of the Darkness Walk. We've had numerous community outreach, inviting people to attend things that the National Alliance on Mental Illness has held, Navigate Recovery Gwinnett and their SOAR program, and many of the programs to know what to do when somebody is in crisis. And so that's I would encourage and challenge every congregation in the state of Georgia and Florida to do the same, because it is a very healing thing, again, for me. but also it's what church should do. They should serve their community and talk openly about, and that's what Cheryl Clore does. She talks openly about organ donation, about suicide, and we pray for those with addictive disorders. And it's at the pulpit every Sunday. So
Yeah. And before we close or have our closing comments, I just want to say, because Dr. Simonet, you mentioned Wendy Palmer, and I just want to shout her out in all of our HD development teams, because part of what they do is going into hospitals and educating hospitals. They work very close with chaplains and making sure that people have accurate information about organ and tissue donation, because as we know, it starts with information, education, and then just thinking about National Donor Sabbath. Even Sean mentioned Cheryl Clore from her church. We're so grateful to have so many church partners who have volunteered, or they're requesting information about National Donor Sabbath. They're requesting presentations because they want to talk to their congregations. And right here in Georgia, we have so many different partners from various different religions, ministries. We even working with the Jewish funeral homes to talk about organ and tissue donation. We're reaching a lot of people, and I just wanted to commend since Dr. Simonet brought it up. Our hospital development team, they are a huge part of making sure that the education starts in the hospitals, and that those hospital teams are educated, because if they have the right information, they're more equipped to give accurate information to families and to chaplains, whomever they're encountering. And so shout out to Wendy. She picked up some materials for her hospitals as well. So woohoo. So I'll turn it back over to you, Bria.
Well, thank you so much, Tiffany. And ladies, thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Walters. Thank you, Dr. Simonet. Thank you, Sean. And thank you, Bella, for joining us and sharing your perspectives today. I just wanted to read off a few comments if you haven't seen. Tissa, excuse me if I mispronounce your name. Tissa says, "You are amazing, Sean." Laura Lee says, "Great conversations, joining late. I'm sure the speakers were introduced earlier. Wish you had their names in the lower thirds." So if you can, once I finish, you can just go ahead and say your name again to share that with Laura Lee. We just had a lot of comments just saying thank you. They love the heartbeat bear that you all are doing in Georgia. There was a question from Fiona. She's asking, are there post-donation counseling services or support groups for donor families? I don't know if any of you all could answer that real quick, but that's what Fiona was asking, if there are post-donation counseling services or support groups for donor families.
I'll go about the donor families, and that was just you have that family coordinator through LifeLink is what we had, and they walked us through everything, the celebration of life that occurs every year. I wasn't sure I was participating in that, and I'm so glad I did. I did a lot of things on my own, and looked at every TED Talk, Googled all the things. I had my sister-in-law, her mother, she lost her brother, and so her mother lost her son. She connected me to the Compassionate Friends group, which is for individuals who have lost children or grandchildren. So I would say LifeLink was my LifeLink on many ways. And I'll just say Tisa Craigmeyer was Candler's organ coordinator. So she is also why I'm walking upright.
Thank you, Sean. And Dr. Walters or Dr. Simonet, if you have anything in closing you'd like to add, please go ahead.
I'll just close by saying death is a part of life, and organ donation can be a wonderful way to bring closure to one's death. And so if you have not ever considered it, I would invite you to consider organ donation for yourself or for your family. It's been a pleasure being with you today.
Thank you, Dr. Simonet.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Walters, you're muted. Let me see. I'm going to go ahead and mute you. Okay, go ahead.
I was just saying, I put it in the chat. I've enjoyed my time with you all today. It's been a joy to be a part of this conversation. I think it's important to keep the conversation going. Death is a part of life. Life is a part of death. And I think if we respect both, we will have less fear and we will have an opportunity to do more about how we handle life and death in a more balanced approach. So that is a part of what organ donation can also do. And when it comes to our faith, whatever our image of God is, we need to ask ourselves, God is actually not doing anything to us. God is actually with us.
Thank you so much. Again, I want to thank you all for joining us today. And thank you to the viewers and the watchers, whether you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube. I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. We hope you will leave with a new piece of information. And more importantly, we hope that you have learned that you can be someone's hero in your community by registering to be an organ, eye, and tissue donor. If you have not already, you can register as a donor by visiting www.lifelinkfoundation.org. And once you do, please don't forget to share your decision with your friends and family. Please keep following LifeLink of Florida and LifeLink of Georgia for more information about National Donor Sabbath, which starts on November 12th through the 14th. Again, I am Bria Herring, and Tiffany Moore is joining with us today, and we thank you all so much. So have a great day, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Have a great day.
Mm-hmm.